The sky was red that morning. It was not the sunrise. It was fire. Somewhere in Europe, a child woke up to the sound of the ground shaking while her mother pressed her hands against the girl's ears, trying to silence the roar coming from above. The sound of aircraft engines filled the air, heavy and constant, as if the world itself were tearing apart. Then came the first explosion, followed by another and another. Windows shattered before the bombs even touched the ground. No one was running toward a target. People were running simply to stay alive. The Second World War did not begin with a single scream. It began as a whisper of hatred that slowly grew into a roar powerful enough to cross oceans and continents. Unlike the First World War, where soldiers faced each other from muddy trenches, this war came from the sky, from the land, and from the sea all at once. It was everywhere, and it showed no mercy. During the First World War, the sky watched. In the second, it attacked. Aircraft could now fly faster, higher, and farther, carrying not only bombs but decisions. Yet those decisions were imprecise. There were no modern targeting systems, no guided weapons. Bombs were dropped over entire cities, and fate decided who lived and who died. London burned night after night as air raid sirens echoed through the streets. Families ran toward underground shelters, many of them never making it in time. At dawn, what remained were streets without names, buildings torn open, and bodies covered in dust and silence. Germany soon suffered the same fate. Hamburg became a storm of fire. Dresden was reduced to ash. The heat was so intense that the air itself seemed to pull people into the flames. Those who did not burn suffocated. And when the bombing stopped, another kind of death began. Cold, hunger, despair. Entire cities were left without homes, water, or electricity. Children died, clinging to the ruins of what had once been their houses. The war no longer needed soldiers to kill. Destruction itself did the job. But the horror was not limited to the cities. On open fields and frozen plains, the war moved faster than ever before. Tanks crossed borders in days. Trucks filled with soldiers followed close behind. Aircraft weakened defenses, artillery shattered positions, and infantry advanced through the ruins. It was fast, efficient, and incredibly deadly. A young Soviet soldier once wrote in his diary, shortly before his death, that there was no time to bury the fallen and that they marched forward over the bodies of their comrades. Millions died this way, in forests, deserts, and shattered towns. Bodies were left where they fell. Names were lost. Families waited forever for news that would never come. This mobile war allowed rapid conquest, but it also enabled massacres on an unimaginable scale. In villages across Eastern Europe, civilians expected soldiers to pass through. Instead, extermination arrived. Homes were stormed, men were executed, women were abused, and children were left to die. Not because of military necessity, but because of ideology. People were not seen as human beings but as obstacles. During the invasion of the Soviet Union, the advance was not only territorial, it was a march of death that stretched thousands of kilometers. Entire villages vanished. Hunger was used as a weapon. Deportation became a death sentence. Disease spread wherever life once existed. In some regions, survival became the rare exception rather than the rule. Far away, in Asia, the war took on another form of terror. In China, crowded cities were bombed relentlessly. Streets filled with refugees turned into killing grounds, yet the most terrifying weapons were invisible. Chemical agents, biological warfare, and disease were unleashed upon civilian populations. Bombs did not always explode. Some infected. People fell ill within days. Families died without understanding what was happening. Science itself was turned into a tool of mass death. There, death did not arrive with noise and fire. It came quietly and stayed. In Japan, the war first arrived through bombing. Cities built largely of wood became oceans of flames. Night turned into day as the sky burned. Thousands died in their sleep. But nothing prepared the world for what followed. A single flash of light, absolute silence, and then annihilation. Hiroshima ceased to be a city. Nagasaki lost all sense of time. Some people vanished instantly. Others wandered for days with burned skin and empty eyes, unaware that they were already dying. Even after the war ended, death continued, invisible and relentless, carried by radiation. Every war has faces, but the Second World War had one that became the symbol of evil. Adolf Hitler did not invent violence, but he gave it permission. Millions were hunted, humiliated, deported, and murdered. Trains packed with human beings rolled toward destinations from which no one returned. Camps where life had no value and people were reduced to numbers, then to ashes. Families were torn apart, cultures erased, and 6 million Jews were murdered alongside millions of others deemed unworthy of life. The machinery of death operated without rest. When the weapons finally fell silent, there was no immediate victory, only quiet. A heavy silence filled with ghosts. Europe lay in ruins. Japan was shattered. The Soviet Union faced starvation. Britain was buried in debt. Cities were rebuilt over invisible graves. Children grew up without parents, and parents grew old without children. The Second World War did not truly end in 1945. It lived on in trauma, memory, and ruins that took decades to fade. This war killed far more than soldiers. It killed civilians, futures, and the illusion that humanity always learns from its mistakes. It showed how far technology can go when guided by hatred, and how deep humanity can fall when empathy is abandoned. To remember is not to glorify. To remember is to resist. Because every time we forget, the world comes dangerously close to repeating it all again.